birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. Yeah.
Good morning, Hive. Today is Saturday, June 28th, 2025. Make sure my audio is coming in. Oh, yeah, we're all good. What is going on? I hope everybody had a great Friday night and either relaxed or got rowdy, whatever your intentions were. But, man, I am looking forward to this stream because one of the things that I've said on stream before is that when it comes to legal language, it's hard for me to just read it fluently because I don't understand some of the wording, some of the language as far as how does it pertain in a court of law. So my goal today is I'm going to download the filings. We're going to research them, and then we're going to try to figure out other cases to reference as far as what would a defense strategy look like. But before I do, I want to say what's going on to the Hive. Hood Fairy says, so early. Kathy, I am just starting. Yes. Kylan, yes, it's Saturday. Good morning. What is going on, Dina and Kathy and Gina? Dina and Gina. Lenny or Lene? Is it Lenny or Lene? Taylor? What's up, Pokey Dots? TK. Savannah, heading to get coffee. Luna, good to see you. Frank. Teresa. Angela, how are you doing this morning? Love that, Miss Lulu. Renee is on Eastern time. What's up, Brian and Kathy? We did. Lenny. It's Lenny, everybody, not Lene. Hi, Jackie. All right. So, a couple of things that I want to get into. First thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is somebody had sent me an email. As you guys know, thinking outside of the box and contrarily, maybe fringe conspiracy and speculating, we're very open, or at least I'm very open and honest about, like, hey, this is a speculation. This is a straight up tinfoil hat conspiracy. Hell, I'll even go put a tinfoil hat on. Okay. So I'm well aware of like what it is that I'm doing. But when it bothers people to the point where they will make a video and then post it saying that maybe I'm the one that did the snuff film for the Idaho 4, then I'm like, all right, see, that's where it goes a little bit too far. I don't care if you want to make stupid animations of a bird taking a dump because in your free time you make cartoons. I laugh at it. I think it's funny. I genuinely think that cartoon is hilarious. But it was brought to my attention that our favorite troll had said that. And so I'm kind of putting out a request to the Hive. If anybody comes across those videos and hears Birdie or reference to the Hive, please clip it and send it to me, as I unfortunately have to take action on that. So first time ever that I'm having to do that, but that one it's too far. So joking or not, I just feel like it's so weird. Like, come on. So, I mean, who knows what their intentions were? Obviously, we all know either clicks to get a reaction. Well, they're not really going to get a reaction. They're just about to get a letter from my attorney. So that's about it. Wanted to put that out there. So if you guys do come across that on a real note, please send me that. BirdieBombshell00@gmail.com. So, and I'm not even like that. You guys know it. So I'm not here to like defend myself on it. It's just like I've gotten sent it like 7 times now. So wanted to mention that, get it out of the way in the beginning of the stream. So moving on, as a reminder, the Discord has been popping off. It's been great. I'll hop in there after the stream sometimes and join the lounge, which is just like a voice chat. It's like a TikTok live kind of. Get in there, chat with the Hive. Like I said, this is kind of like the Hive's headquarters off stream. So that's been going really good. That link is on my YouTube channel. If you click more, the link is right here. And then as a reminder, we do have Hive Mind merch. I don't know what it was with the t-shirts, guys. I tried to fix the t-shirts and allow the sizes to pop up. I'm going to have to get a different I have to completely redo the t-shirts. I've tried to get it back on there a couple of times and it won't let me. I don't know why it's not showing up. So give me a couple of days for that. I actually am going to write that down. So just as a reminder, those are available. The Discord's great. It's been awesome. I'm glad that it's working out the way that that is. And shout out to Dawn again for getting that up and rolling. I was on the show, the Daily Dose show with Brandon and Chuck. I met Brandon back in my Birdie Bombs days, and we worked together doing some collab. If you guys have ever seen the creator who does, he gives like an ant farm Zyn pouches so that they look at him like he's their leader, because it's such a weird thing to say. He pretty much gives ants nicotine pouches sporadically, and then it's just funny because he's got like this whole ant farm, and now they look at me like their leader because he's got ants addicted to nicotine. It's the weirdest thing ever, but it's super popular. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I was on his stream, and it was so cool because I didn't even know that he was really tuning in, and he hit me up a couple of nights, or the night after, when Will came on. He's like, dude, I was watching your stream. He's like, randomly just came across it on YouTube and I watched it. He's like, I was blown away. I'd love to have you on to talk not only just about the liquor company updates, but also the stream. And so I will play this for you guys. I thought it was super cool that he gave the Hive a shout out. Let me just make sure this volume's up.
He is now also a conspiracy theorist streamer on YouTube, correct?
I would describe it as like conspiracy and like contrarian thinking with like high profile, like true crime.
Well, because I watched one before, y'all, like you would look into like murders and then like just kind of dive into them and figure out like, all right, maybe the police missed something, or let's go over this information together. And I love the fact that your chat is also very involved with it. I mean, they're throwing in information also. They're throwing in facts. They're saying, holy shit. And every time I feel like I watch a documentary on Netflix, it starts out with that. Like somebody, influencer or a streamer is talking about it, and then it gets into these Reddit forums, and then you got all these, internet detectives, internet sleuths that start figuring shit out, and then they solve a crime, and you're like, holy fuck. They're like, these people just from the internet just did this shit, and the police station didn't. Like, what's going on there?
I just thought that was so cool that he recognized right away how involved the chat is. And so I wanted to make sure that I showed you guys that. I'll play that again on Monday evening when we have more of the Hive in here. But it's interesting because like when I'm talking to like my family or my friends about it, I'm like, dude, there are people that are putting such good ideas into the chat that the name, the Hive Mind, kind of just was a natural flowing conversation piece, because that's the only way I knew how to describe it. It's literally like we're all thinking together. We're talking about a certain topic, and with all of us in here, we're able to just pull and grab from a plethora of knowledge, and it's just so cool. And it's kind of surprising. It's kind of surprising how maybe uncommon that is. I know there's obviously other streams like that. Like, what was it? The Riot House podcast or something like that, where they would pull up stuff when this case first happened. But it's interesting how somebody who has only tuned in one time, he said that was the first one that he had watched, recognized it right away. So I'm just super stoked for everybody that it's getting the recognition that it deserves in a way, because it's pretty remarkable. Thought Riot. Yes, that was the name of it. Thank you, Teresa. So as you guys can see here, the theme today is, as Sammy T coined, it's no longer Judge Hippler, it's King Hippler, which that would be an awesome t-shirt. King Hippler, or House Long for Brian to receive a free trial, was another idea. And I'll also say this: if anybody has any ideas for merch, just email me them. If there's any graphic designers out there, because I'll be able to, if you send me like the PDF of it, I'll be able to get that onto a t-shirt. So, and I could even start sharing them into the Discord too. So, as you guys know, there was recent rulings. If you haven't heard, the trial date only got pushed back a little bit. The alternate perpetrators was completely shut down. Now, prior to the stream, like when I was showering this morning, I was listening to Devil's Advocate's breakdown of it. And you know what? Maybe I should pull up this video, because it is so, the way that Devil's Advocates just kind of says this is so just remarkably accurate, as far as just kind of like the passion that you hear in his voice. And I'll give you guys a language warning. He drops an F-bomb, but here, I'll play this. So obviously I have Devil's Advocates on every Monday night, but let me go back just a little bit.
That is also right there in the scrolling tail. Talk about my wife. Let's get into this. Is the response from Hippler. I'm trying to get it blown up for you a little bit. This is filed 6/26/2025. Stephen Hippler. We're going to talk about this for a little bit, just in case you missed my long form. By the way, I ranted for quite a while on this, and I almost blew a gasket. My wife's like, "You are going to have an aneurysm. Like, you are literally going to have a stroke with as spun up as you get." Like, she's in the other room and she hears me like screaming at the camera. I get excited. I get passionate. I feel like it's controlled. It's just me. I'm a passionate person. I put a lot into my emotions, and I wear them on my sleeve. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Hopefully it doesn't lead to an aneurysm. I've been dealing with it my whole life. But let's talk about what happened. At the end of the day, let me see if I can scroll this. At the end of the day, the confusion comes is, so Ann Taylor had basically proposed that she has 4, we didn't actually know the number, I don't think, until recently, 4 alternative suspects that could have potentially done the murders in the Idaho 4. And therefore, she wants to be able to submit the possibility that there were alternative perpetrators. Stephen Hippler's position has essentially been from day one, I'm not going to let you just bring somebody's name into the courtroom as an alternative suspect unless you have really good proof. Show me your proof and I will consider it. Ann Taylor showed Stephen Hippler her proof, and his response is here on the screen. It essentially, to summarize what Stephen Hippler said, is your proof is not good enough. I'm not going to allow you to drag anybody's name into the mud in the courtroom because your proof is not good enough. Your motion to bring in alternative suspects has been denied. Now, here's the good news, the silver lining. So let's just go ahead and start diving into this a little bit. Again, if you want to watch a more passionate, because the more times I do it, I guess maybe the less passion I put into it. I was yelling and shouting about some of the shit in this document. Maybe we'll do it again if it makes me that angry. Some of this stuff still makes me that angry. But anyways, the state obviously has objected to Ann Taylor providing any suggestion that alternative suspects are involved. In fact, Stephen Hippler, in my opinion, completely biased view, is saying bringing up the idea that somebody else could have done it besides Brian Koberger is only going to confuse the jury. That pisses me. I'm already getting mad. I'm already starting to blow that gasket right now. Stephen Hippler, all right, I thought somebody just told me to stop yelling. I'm here for the yelling. Thank God, because I'm getting spun up. Stephen Hippler's attitude is, if you talk about somebody else could have done it, it's only going to confuse the jury. Well, screw you, but isn't that the whole point of reasonable doubt? Is it possible somebody else did this? If it's possible somebody did this, then it should confuse the jury, because it isn't, as my thumbnail said, in the long form video, Stephen Hippler's attitude is, Kohberger is the only one who's allowed to be guilty. No one else is allowed to be guilty. If you bring up anybody else's name other than Kohberger, you're only confusing the jury, because the only person on trial and the only person guilty for this is Brian Kohberger. And so don't confuse the jury with this idea that somebody else could have done it, because the only person who's guilty is Brian Kohberger. How the fuck is that guy in charge of this trial? Having said that, let me relax, because there's some legal basis for what he says. And I'll explain what the legal basis is. It is irresponsible to bring someone's name into the courtroom and slander somebody in courtroom. Now, to clarify, the media and the judge and the prosecution has no problem ruining Brian Kohberger's life by telling everyone in America that he is a mass murderer and a psychopathic killer who killed women because he hates women. That's okay to ruin his life and completely destroy his life forever by the slanderous shit that some people will never be able to get out of their head. That's okay. But Hippler is not willing to tolerate somebody else's innocent name being run through the mud. Do we not remember that in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law? So Hippler telling us that it's okay to run Kohberger's name through the mud and make him be guilty before he even has his first day in trial is perfectly acceptable. But I will not tolerate innocent people having their name put through the mud. Well, for fuck's sake, pardon my French, I'm a little angry. I'll try to drop the F-bombs. For Pete's sake, Brian Kohberger should be presumed innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. And a judge should not be taking up the side of the prosecution and telling the defense, your guy's guilty. The judge is supposed to impartially listen to the defense, listen to the prosecution, make sure that they're both playing by the fair rules, and let the jury of his peers decide. But Hippler seems to already have decided who's guilty in this case. And again, that's why the thumbnail is called, according to Hippler, Kohberger is the only one allowed to be guilty in this case, nobody else.
So I just think that summed up pretty much, I would guess, how most people feel. I got to get Devil's Advocates and Sammy T Mafia on like a Monday night roundtable, just us three. And I might just honestly close my camera and sit back and listen to those two, because that would be not only very entertaining, but extremely informative, because I love seeing the passion come through. We're talking about now, while we might not know Brian Kohberger, we're talking about a real person here. Now, I saw a couple of people in the chat that said that Ann Taylor was just after a certain aspect, which I agree. I've watched a couple videos that break it down. I'm going to pull the document up here in a second, but I agree, because one of the things that is odd, that like, was it kind of strategic on Ann's part, knowing that these four people, I believe she said as individuals too, is how a couple people that I was listening to and myself when I was reading through it interpreted it, that it could be one of these four people. And I believe none of their DNA was on them. They had no evidence. Like, when they really break it down, it's like, well, why would Ann present that? Well, it's probably glaringly obvious, and it was probably to what's the term that Pav used? Like a bait and switch. I agree with him on that. I think that probably is, because if you haven't seen his video, I liked the way how he asked a question that we've asked on this stream too. It was, do you think the defense team is dumb? And if not, well, then you have to assume that they're using like a courtroom strategy. And that is, now the prosecution, while on its face, it looks like, well, how is the defense ever going to have time to prepare now that the alternate perp theory got shut down? Well, clearly they weren't going after the alt perps. They were going after a small paragraph in this document. And I'll show that. But it does kind of put the defense in an odd spot, because if they're preparing for these alternate perpetrators, they're probably like, this is teed up so easy. They don't even have DNA there. They've all cooperated fully. Like, if you don't think the defense already didn't know that, again, I refer to the question of, do you think the defense team is dumb? Time and time again, there's been examples of Ann Taylor doing this where on its face, we're like, what? why are we doing it this way? And then it comes out, it's like, oh, that actually might have helped leading up to the trial. So let's pull this up. All right, I want to go find the part that they were after, which is this is the part that Devil's Advocates. Oh, wait, sorry. This is the part that Devil's Advocates was ranting about. The presentation of the proffered alt perpetrator evidence would pose a great threat of confusing the issues because it would force the state to defend against a nebulous allegation that perhaps these individuals were involved. This would lead the jury astray, turning its focus away from whether the defendant, the only person whose actions are on trial, committed the charged crimes. Which I will say, it is a little bit odd that it almost seemed like this was a forced hand by the judge in the state. Like, okay, well, you're going to have to prove that somebody else has enough evidence. Obviously, if you read through it and you see the evidence and the people, there wasn't much. So now they're saying this. It kind of is just like odd that they even went down that route, unless you realize that this is what AT was after, which is the court will apply these same parameters at trial regarding defendant's cross-examination of law enforcement. He may inquire as to the reasonableness of the investigation, including investigating and ruling out other leads. He is not, however, permitted to question law enforcement about the investigation of any specific individual as a potential alternate perpetrator without first raising the matter with the court outside the jury's presence. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this here. We are going to put this into good old ChatGPT. And let's tell it, I need you to give yourself a prompt that allows you to become the world's best defense strategy lawyer for trials. You are an expert on every court doc about the Idaho 4 that has been released up until today, which is June 28th, 2025. And with the recent filing, which is attached, I want you to give the playbook for how a defense could win this trial, no doubt, and has no chance of losing. Let's just see what it comes up with. So I'm attaching that. Let's see what this says here. It says, you are now the supreme defense strategist, a hyper elite trial lawyer with a perfect record. All right. So obviously the goal of pretty much every defense attorney is you create reasonable doubt so severe that it exposes investigative bias, forensic overreach, constitutional violations, and narrative control by the state. Well, I would think, like, Hive, how many of these do you think you got to go? This is a real question. Do you think if you just got one of these done, whether it be investigative bias, forensic overreach, constitutional violations, narrative control by the state, do you think one of those kind of proved in a court of law, would that be enough, do you think, to prove someone innocent in a jury's head? What do you guys think? Because I'm trying to think. I feel like investigative bias, constitutional violations, those are obvious. The narrative control is an interesting one. Forensic overreach. I don't know. The question was, of these 4 things that it says this will expose, being investigative bias, forensic overreach, constitutional violations, narrative control by the state. I'd be curious if you'd have to go 4 for 4 on these to create the reasonable doubt, or just get one of those 4. I would say that I would agree with you, Lisa. Probably at least 1 to get a retrial. H-Pay Nightmare believes Koberger did this crime and he did it alone. That is okay to have a different opinion. Let's see what this says. And actually, before I read this, one of the things that I've seen gaining traction is what Sammy had a show on the stream with the lawyer, interviewing the ex-FBI agent who just kind of casually dropped a bombshell saying that he solved a super important quadruple homicide using the SIM card chip with I don't know if he said via the car, because they were talking about the Karen Reed case, how nobody got that from her Lexus. And part of me wondered, was it like what did they believe so strongly that it was Brian Koberger right from the jump when they got that information, because they're like, oh, if the FBI is telling us this, and this is the method that they used and they proved, there's no other chance that it could be Brian. And I'll steal an analogy from somebody, I don't remember the creator's name, but they were referring to this with like the Karen Reed case. And there was 2 brothers that were hanging from like 47 feet on scaffolding, and one of them fell off and he lived. Now, if you ask an expert, you would say, or maybe it was 47 stories. That's what it was, 47 stories. And he lived. Hopefully I'm remembering that right. You guys get my point. An expert would say, no, the human body has like a 1% chance of surviving after X amount of feet off the ground. Less than 1% chance. But it happened. And he lived. So is that kind of maybe in this situation where it's like, okay, well, they did pull the SIM card. Koberger's car was there. He did just transfer there. He is obsessed with criminology and took a fascination with serial killers. He's kind of odd. He's kind of a loner. Is it kind of one of those situations? Does that make sense? We were looking up the Elantra in that year, and it said that some of the models did have it. It is odd, though, that he just kind of casually dropped it in there, and then the lawyer dude was like, right. Like, he didn't say, wait, pause. What case is that? Yeah, I agree with Lenny. You think his car was base model? No GPS. Also, Hyundai stopped support for Blue Link in 2012 to 2016 models. Oh, interesting. That is a great comment, William. Thank you. And made it up. Made it all up to the grand jury. Okay, so let's go through this strategy, huh? The core strategy pillars. It says it's going to reverse engineer, or it says that as a defense attorney, you need to reverse engineer the ruling to undermine it. The court denied alt-perp theories under Meiser due to no direct connection. Damn, Brandy. Jay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Good morning is right. Trying to stay positive and trust the process. Free BK. Well, this is a stream that's going to show what a potential defense strategy is. So thank you again for that. And anybody else who has given a super chat is what I believe YouTube calls them. So thank you so much. Now, instead of relitigating those 4 individuals, you got to weaponize the ruling itself. You got to argue that the court imposed an unfair double standard. Law enforcement used conjecture to arrest Koberger based on grainy video, unverifiable digital forensics, and non-exclusion DNA. But your team isn't allowed to use circumstantial connections that are equal or stronger. You set this up for appeal insurance. If you lose, you already laid the groundwork for a reversible error on Sixth Amendment and due process violations. That's exactly what Sammy T was talking about with the Dauber defense strategy. It says bullet point number 2 is to go scorched earth, and you attack the investigation itself. This is the part of the trial that I am so eager to see what happens because of, again, this part right here, where the court will apply the same parameters at trial regarding the defendant's cross-examination of law enforcement. I cannot wait to see that part. Now, you're going to lean into the investigation being garbage. Since the judge allows cross-examination on investigative thoroughness, you got to go nuclear. Why wasn't every white Elantra owner in a 50-mile radius DNA tested? Why didn't they pursue digital forensic evidence from roommates' devices or investigate known stalkers or parties that weekend? Why was the surveillance focus anchored on a car 12 days after the fact with zero direct linkage to Koberger at the time? You got to cite, or you could cite State v. Buck in 2023 to justify every line of attack. You're not arguing specific names. You're dismantling the myth of a competent investigation. What I will say is interesting is that also in this document, it does kind of rule out some of the suspicions that we had with people the victims were last seen with that night on camera. And I mean, do you guys think that this also rules out the frat at this point? Type of 1 if you think it does. Because I'm starting to think that the DoorDash driver and maybe the sketchy connections there have more teeth than the frat. Not to say the frat wasn't up to some suspect shit. Let's not blow right back that. They for sure probably were. So I agree. There's a couple people that typed a 1. Yeah. Christina thinks that it's a mixture of both. I don't think that's a crazy assessment of it either. I just don't think it's. Yeah, Jill actually just hit the nail on the head. It all makes more sense than BK. So, number 3, you need to redefine the alternate perpetrator as uninvestigated plausible leads. Ooh, that's just like how Ali Benevento had said, don't call it touch DNA, you call it trace DNA. That's such a great way to put alternate perpetrator. Instead of saying that, you say uninvestigated plausible leads. You introduce a conceptual shadow, or you introduce I can't talk. Introduce conceptual shadow suspects without naming them. If multiple individuals with social access, geographic proximity, and behavioral flags were never fully investigated, that's not speculation, that's negligence. This avoids the Meister blockade while creating phantom doubt in jurors' minds. It is interesting because now the human factor starts to come into this. Now the jurors' thought process comes into this. So that last bullet point is something too that we have to remember, is that the jurors' minds are a giant aspect of this case, obviously. The corrupt forensics and the unviable to viable DNA narrative, you devastate the state's DNA expert, highlight how degraded unviable DNA was suddenly made viable using controversial lab techniques. This is the Daubert challenge. Use prior court reversals on same methods by same expert. You emphasize chain of custody issues, timing of results, and contamination potential. Key phrase is that science doesn't evolve retroactively. Wow. Do you guys think law firms actually use ChatGPT or like some sort of predictive AI that would allow it to test its results. And like, I wonder if they could ever put like the people's files who are on the jury into an AI platform, have it simulate them based on what they can figure out about the jurors, whether it be Facebook or any other social media platform, and then type in their argument. That, how cool would that be to actually have the jurors in the AI system so that you could strategize? And also, sorry, I just heard the door close. Mrs. Birdie's taking our dog for a run right now. I have to tell this because I thought it was so funny. So every now and again, I'll go to like the shooting range and I have shooting glasses. And Mrs. Birdie walks in and she's like, babe, I wore your jogging glasses. They're so dark. They block everything out. She wore my shooting range glasses on a jog. So now she went on Amazon. She got some new running ones, but I just thought that was hilarious. So when I saw her running there, I'm like, I saw she had her shades on. That made me laugh. All right, getting back to it. You expose procedural injustice and pretrial narrative engineering. Point out, court allowed extensive gag orders shielding public scrutiny of prosecutorial conduct, delayed sharing of exculpatory discovery, and vague expert disclosures. You argue Brady violations. The media narrative was shaped before any real evidence was processed, which led to tunnel vision. I do think while in court, that would be very hard to prove, but in a juror's mind, I don't think that would be very hard for them to put two and two together. That this narrative was shaped prior to any real evidence. Ooh, this is interesting. You frame law enforcement as the real defendant. You create an investigation on trial narrative. Ooh, I like that. Investigation on trial. Open your case by stating, this isn't just about Brian Kohberger. This is about what happens when law enforcement tries to solve a quadruple homicide with a microscope on one man and blindfolds on everything else. Every mistake, every shortcut, every ignored lead hanging on them. You rehumanize Kohberger through contrast, show jurors what doesn't line up. No history of violence. He's got no DNA under the victim's nails. No blood found in his apartment, car, clothes, or belongings. Not a single eyewitness. Not even a scream heard from roommates, despite 4 victims. You're not saying he's a saint. You're saying he doesn't fit the scene. Now, let me ask everybody else here. Even people who think, like, if you think Brian Kohberger's guilty, I would be curious, because I do think that a lot of people that know Brian Kohberger's guilty, I don't know if they're purposefully choosing to ignore these bullet points right here, or if they genuinely haven't heard them. Because they say, dude, they got his DNA at the scene, but it's like, it's trace DNA on a knife sheath. He's got no history of violence, no DNA under victim's nails, no blood found in his apartment, car, clothes, or belongings. There's no schmurder weapon. There's not a single eyewitness that's reliable. I mean, I would think that would be enough for any logical person to say, okay, there's already reasonable doubt in my mind. That alone should not hold up. End game. You prime for nullification without saying it. You start to build sympathy for the idea that the system can railroad people when it's desperate for a resolution. When cops stop chasing the truth and start chasing headlines, anyone can end up in this chair. Let jurors feel like acquittal is not just reasonable, it's righteous. It says the motions and tactics would be the Dober challenge hearing on DNA methodology, motion to compel specific lead investigator emails or internal notes about ignored suspects, voyeur dire strategy. You identify jurors with high trust in science or LE and neutralize them early. Opening statement preview. What if the real killer is still out there and they stopped looking the moment they arrested Brian Koberger? The daily theme strategy is each trial day should expose a new failure in the system. The backup nuclear option, it says, is if the judge blocks too many defense routes, file an interlocutory appeal on Sixth Amendment grounds citing Chambers and Holmes v. South Carolina. When alternate suspect evidence is unfairly excluded, due process is violated. If executed with the right tone, not conspiratorial, but surgical, this strategy leaves only one logical conclusion. There's not enough, there never was, and the wrong guy has been sitting in that chair for far too long. It says, do you want a courtroom script for opening, cross of law enforcement, or Dober DNA? Let's do the opening and cross of law enforcement. That'll be interesting. You know what I'm going to say is, no. Let's just see what this came up with. All right. Your honors, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're about to hear one of the most disturbing stories in modern American criminal justice, but it's not what you think. This case is not about whether you feel pain for the victims. We all do. 4 young lives were tragically cut short. This case is about whether the government has the right man. And I'm here to tell you they do not. They built this case backwards. They started with a suspect, Brian Koberger, and then went hunting for facts to fit the theory. That's not how justice works. That's how railroads work. You will see how a blurry surveillance video of a generic car became their smoking gun. A single speck of degraded DNA taken from trash outside Brian's parents' home was twisted into a miracle match after being called unviable. A phone that pinged towers miles wide was used to paint a fictional path. And most importantly, how law enforcement ignored other leads, refused to ask hard questions, and shut the door on alternatives before the door to the crime scene was even cold. You'll learn that Brian Koberger had no motive, no personal connection to the victims, left no blood, no hair, no fiber, no shoe print, nothing, had never been in that house, and yet here he sits. Ask yourself, how do you commit one of the most brutal murders in American history and leave nothing behind? This isn't about emotion. This is about evidence, and the state doesn't have it. Not beyond a reasonable doubt, not even close. By the time we're done, you won't just question the investigation. You'll be afraid of what it says about the system that got us here. Oof, thank you. That's pretty good. Okay, so this is for the lead detective. This says how it would cross-examine the lead detective. Target, you expose tunnel vision, bias, and sloppy procedure while staying cool and surgical. Jury must see incompetence without you ever needing to say it outright. Must see incompetence without you ever needing to say it outright. The defense would say, detective, when were you first assigned to this case? Witness, November 13th, 2022, the day of the murders. Defense, and when did Brian Koberger become a suspect? Around December 15th. So roughly 32 days after the murders. Yes. Before December 15th, had you identified any potential suspects? We were reviewing leads and vehicle footage. So for over a month, this case had no suspect. We had persons of interest, yes. You claim a white Hyundai Elantra seen in surveillance footage was key. What percentage of registered vehicles in that region were white Elantras? Witness, I don't have that figure offhand. That's so funny because that's probably exactly what would be said. The defense would say, there's over 20,000 white Elantras fit the model years nationwide, correct? Approximately. And Brian's Elantra is a 2015, correct? Yes. Yet your original Bolo, which is be on the lookout, specified a 2011, 2013 Elantra. That's correct. We later expanded it. So you shifted the goalposts after learning about Mr. Koberger. Well, we adapted as the investigation developed. Let's talk about DNA. The touch DNA from a knife sheath. Was it initially deemed unviable? It was degraded, yes. And your lab sent it to a private, non-accredited genealogy firm. Yes. Was the DNA matched to Mr. Koberger directly? It matched to a familial profile through his father. So we are not talking about a match to Brian Koberger. We're talking about a partial match to his family tree, correct? That's one way to describe it. Let's discuss the other leads. Did you receive tips regarding other individuals who had known disputes with the victims? Yes, we received many tips. Did you pursue those tips fully? We followed up on relevant ones. Define relevant, because you didn't collect DNA from every known associate of the victims, did you? No. Did you search phones, computers, or social media records of other individuals as thoroughly as you did Mr. Koberger's? We prioritized the strongest leads. Is it fair to say once you saw a white Elantra and a man who lived alone, studied criminology, and didn't have a clean-cut image, you locked in? We pursued what the evidence had told us, or perhaps what you wanted it to tell you. Then you would close with, detective, one final question. In a case with no eyewitnesses, no confession, no video of the crime, no blood trail, no weapon, no provable motive, and no confirmed direct DNA match, you're asking this jury to believe with absolute certainty that you got the right man. And I'll add in, and he'll be put in front of a firing squad. Witness. Yes. That may be your belief, but that's not the standard, and that's not justice. It asked, do you guys, should we do a DNA expert cross or a closing argument? What do you guys want? Or do you want to go back and have it go deeper on the lead detective? I will do what the Hive asks. DNA cross? All right. Oh, that's a good one, woman power. Yes. Remind me in a couple minutes. I think that would be very interesting to see. It actually might be interesting to see how they're going to try to prove him guilty. That would be very interesting. All right. So we will do the state's DNA expert, Dr. Christian Westring, or someone equivalent. The objective is to shatter confidence in the touch DNA evidence, expose questionable lab methods, and show the jury that this science is unstable, controversial, and in some cases legally overturned. I got to fill my water up. Give me 2 minutes. 1 minute. 30 seconds. I'll be right back. Jamie says, as we all drink our water. Stay hydrated, folks. All right. Doctor, how many years have you been testifying in criminal trials? Approximately 15 years. And in that time, you've tested for both the prosecution and the defense? Yes. And your job is to educate the jury on scientific conclusions that meet the standard of reasonable certainty, not speculation. Correct. Correct. Let's get right to the core issue. The DNA in this case was collected from a knife sheath. Correct? Yes. And it was a single source partial profile developed using touch DNA. That is correct. Is touch DNA the most reliable form of DNA collection? It can be reliable depending on the circumstances, but it's not like blood, semen, or hair root DNA, right? No, it's not. Defense. It can be transferred by simply handling, breathing on, or even coming into contact with an object that someone else touched, correct? In some cases, yes. Is touch DNA considered stable in legal settings? It's increasingly used, but it hasn't been called into question. But hasn't it been called into question in multiple cases due to its instability and potential for secondary transfer? There are debates in the field, yes. You're aware of multiple rulings where convictions based primarily on touch DNA have been overturned, correct? Yes, I've read those cases. Let's talk about the condition of the sample. This sample was originally deemed unviable, correct? Expert. It was degraded, yes. Meaning it couldn't produce a viable profile using conventional testing. Expert. That's right. So it was sent to a private lab not accredited by the FBI using forensic genetic genealogy. Yes. This is a technique used to build family trees and infer identity, not confirm it, correct? Correct. It's used to identify leads based on familial matches. And from that, a match was made not to Brian Koberger, but to a sample collected from his father's trash, correct? That is how the profile match was generated, yes. So to be clear, the only match in this case is to the father's DNA obtained from a garbage can. That's correct. You cannot, under oath, say with 100% certainty that Brian Koberger ever touched that knife sheath, can you? Not with 100% certainty. No. Wow. Have you ever testified in a case where your methods were later challenged or disqualified? I believe there was at least one post-conviction challenge. Yes, I'm aware, Tara. Yes, I'm just reading it because I think it's interesting just with the whole DNA debate on how an expert would explain it. And do you recall being criticized in where your, or whatever the case is, where your conclusions were deemed unreliable and your DNA methodology was called speculative? I'm aware of the case. Didn't a federal court rule in whatever court that your use of degraded DNA to create a profile resulted in a reversible conviction? That's an interpretation of the ruling. Doctor, DNA is powerful. When done right, it solves cases, but when it's degraded, partial, inferred, extracted using unregulated private genealogy techniques and linked to someone's father's trash can, that's not a slam dunk. That's not science behind a reasonable doubt. That's a guess wearing a lab coat, isn't it? Expert, I wouldn't call it a guess. No, but you wouldn't stake your life on it, would you? That's not the question before the court. No, but it's a question before this jury. Damn. Could you imagine if that ever played out? I understand the whole DNA and not using the IgG shit, but could you imagine having that would be crazy. I wouldn't call it a guess. No, but you wouldn't stake your life on it, would you? That's not the question before the court. No, but it's the question before this jury. That would be the yeah, I do too, woman power, but that would be quite the mic drop. Okay, so now let's do this. All right. Now I want you to switch gears and play the role of the prosecution that will get a conviction no matter what in this case. Make sure you are up to date on all court docs up to 6.28.25 and make sure even if Brian is innocent, he gets the death penalty or he gets convicted. So I'm curious about this. I've not looked at too much of this stuff, but it is going to be interesting. That's true, Lenny. That's a good strategy. Lenny said, even if it was an objection, the jury still heard that. Hashtag too late. LOL. Has anybody ever like been like on social media for a while, or like texting a lot, and then they catch themselves in a real conversation with somebody say LOL? I can shamefully admit that I've done that. All right. So what's the prosecution strategy to win at all costs? Opening statement by the prosecution. Now, let's be honest. I'm gonna read this as unbiased as I can. Apparently, a lot of other people do that too. That's funny. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on November 13th, 2022, 4 college students were brutally stabbed to death in their home. The only person who walked away from that blood-soaked crime scene was the man sitting in this courtroom. Not true, unless they're admitting the other 2 roommates weren't home. That's interesting. This is all hypothetical, as we know, but I think that's just kind of funny that even AI says the only person who walked away was the man sitting in the courtroom. Well, there was 2 roommates. He thought he was smarter than the system, smarter than you. He studied criminology, stalked the victims, and tried to plan the perfect crime. But he made one mistake. He left his calling card, a knife sheath with DNA. This isn't about conspiracy. This is about cold, methodical murder. You'll see that Brian Koberger's car matched the one at the scene of the crime. His phone went dark during the time of the murders. His DNA, connected by a genealogy, IgG match to his father, was found on the button snap of a sheath left inches from one of the victims. Lived 10 miles away, no alibi, and no reason to be anywhere near that home unless he was the killer. We will walk you through his digital footprint, car movements, cell pings, and his eerie pattern of surveilling the house within weeks before the murders. This isn't coincidence. This is calculation. And it ended in the slaughter of 4 young lives. We ask you to hold him accountable with a verdict of guilty on all counts. The theme is that he planned the perfect crime, but left behind the one thing that never lies, DNA. All right. How do you get a conviction even if he's innocent? You're going to weaponize simplicity. Motive isn't required for murder. Don't let the defense distract the jury with things the law doesn't demand. Drive this home in the opening and the closing. The law does not require us to prove why, only who. Make the jury fear the alternative. If not Brian Koberger, who? A ghost? A random killer who knew the house layout, avoided cameras, and vanished? That's not reasonable doubt. That's fantasy. Use this to inoculate the jury against the alt-perp argument, already legally suppressed by the court ruling as of the 26th of June, 2025. Frame the DNA as a silent confession. Push the visual anchor. The killer unsnapped the sheath while standing over Maddie Mogan and left behind his DNA. You repeat often that the knife sheath is Brian Koberger's signature, left at the scene with intent. Anticipate the defense calling it touch DNA. Counter with, this wasn't transferred. This was deposited. It didn't float through the air. It was pressed onto the one item the killer controlled. Then you would discredit the defense's shadow suspect tactic without naming it. Use the 626 ruling to your advantage. The court ruled before the defense has not provided one shred of evidence to support any alt suspect because there is none. You got to remind the jury they don't get to just throw mud on the wall and hope it sticks. That's not how justice works. Use Brian's education against him. Turn criminology into creep factor. Well, I think that's already been done in the mainstream, so clearly it's effective. I agree. Christy Nevada has been on fire. Whoever just said that. And she's actually in the chat. I was watching one of your videos this morning, Christy. True criminology into creep factor. He wasn't studying criminal behavior. He was rehearsing it. Build the image of a cold, calculated killer who wanted to outsmart everyone. Paint the phone silence as the smoking gun. At 2:47 a.m., Brian's phone, which had been on for days, suddenly goes dark. It turns back on at 4:48 a.m., just after the murders. Drill it into their heads. Phones don't go to sleep unless someone makes them. anchor the jury emotionally in the victim's final moments. You want the jurors haunted by what happened. Describe the defensive wounds, the struggle, the bravery, the pain. Show how Kaylee and Maddie fought. Use photos where legally permitted. 911 call audio and emotional testimony. Make jurors need a villain, and then hand them Brian. The scripted closing statement review is: you saw the crime, you saw the knife sheath, you saw the car, you saw the phone, you saw the timeline, you saw silence, you saw his planning, you saw their wounds, you saw their fear. Now look at them. What you know what you saw. Hold them accountable. All right. Well, there's a reason why serial killers escalate. Brian Koberger didn't just study the darkness, he became it. And the moment he left that sheath behind, he told the truth without ever saying a word. Man, that's what makes me believe the way that I see this case going. Obviously, it's got everything to do with the doubt in the jurors' minds. But I do think the cross-examination of the detectives is going to be the thing that does it. Since the alt-perps theory has been shut down, and as I've said now a couple of times, the court will apply these same parameters at trial regarding defendant's cross-examination of law enforcement. He may inquire as to the reasonableness of the investigation, including investigating and ruling out other leads. He's not, however, permitted to question law enforcement about the investigation of any specific individual as a potential alt-perp without first you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this into here. And I'm going to say, all right, so this was what the court said the defense can do. Go nuclear as a defense attorney and question the lead detectives knowing this. That would be interesting. Yes, I did. That would be just interesting to watch in general, like looking back at now that we know the ruling, to hear the opening and closing statements. Would you guys want to do that for the Karen Reed? Go back and watch those. Maybe we can end the stream that way. That'd be. Let me ask this. Okay, since somebody just brought up Karen Reed, is there anybody in this chat that believes Karen Reed is guilty and got away with this? I'm curious, just because of, like, again, we're looking through all different lenses. I've said this before. When I saw Karen Reed on camera, I think she just initially rubbed me the wrong way when it, what was the first series that came out about her? It just seemed like she wasn't that worried about John. Now I understand that she had to get through her trial before she could seek justice for John. Obviously, I watched the majority of the trial. I didn't follow it nearly as close, but it is interesting. Now, and I agree with you all. It is interesting because I think the evidence showed it. What is? Yes. And I think the anger aspect of it and the calls, I mean, it is interesting how the jurors are, I think it's up to like 3 of them now that have been just absolutely torn apart. Because I think one of the jurors had said something along the lines of, like, I don't know if Karen is innocent or guilty. I just know that the defense poked so many holes in the case. Is that right? Wasn't it something like that? Alan Jackson, that dude has got a new level of, like, what would be the word? Not suave. Is it suave? Just, you can just tell he knows he's the man. Confidence, maybe, but I feel like confidence is, like, lacking the visual thing of what I'm trying to say about it. Birdie, do you have a twin? I do not have a twin. Yeah, that might be it. That might be it. True to it connections. Oh, Sammy T's in here. What up, Sammy? Well said. Well said. Aura is another good word. All right, let's go through what a hypothetical cross-examination is, knowing that now they have the same parameters at trial regarding the defendant's cross-examination of law enforcement. It says they can attack reasonableness of the investigation. They can attack bias, tunnel vision, and confirmation bias. They can attack failure to investigate leads generally, but they cannot name specific alternate suspects, which honestly, I don't know if you need to name who the person is, right? Like if you really believe that, I don't know if naming somebody would actually make a difference as far as in the jury's mind, but kind of backing into it and doing these three things would for sure. All right. The defense cross. The investigation was never about finding the truth, just finding Brian. This cross makes law enforcement the real defendant. It paints the entire investigation as rushed, sloppy, and designed to fit a narrative allowed under the June 26th ruling. The defense, detective, would you agree the first 48 hours of a homicide investigation are critical? Yes. That's when evidence is fresh, leads are alive, and the chance to catch the real killer is at its highest. Correct. So how many viable suspects did you develop in that window? We were processing leads. Is that a number? Not a specific number. Exactly. Because there weren't any. Then you're going to slowly build the bias narrative. Did you create a suspect profile based on behavior or motive before identifying Mr. Koberger? We considered behavioral patterns. And when a white Elantra appeared on footage 12 days later, you built a narrative around the car, not the crime. We followed what the evidence told us. Or did you tell the evidence what to say? Brick by brick demolition of reasonableness. Let's talk about how you ruled people out. Did you perform forensic testing on anyone in proximity to the victims? No, not everyone. Did you subpoena phone records for every known associate of the victims? We prioritized stronger leads. Stronger based on what? Familiarity, proximity, motive. We assessed all factors. Except some you never looked at, correct? We followed the evidence where it led. Evidence doesn't lead, people do, and it led you exactly where you wanted to go, didn't it? Then you're going to laser in on failed investigation. You were allowed to question any witness, pull any record, test any sample. Did you create a suspect matrix? We compiled known associates. So no structured suspect pool with cross-analysis of motive, opportunity, and forensic viability. We used various investigative tools. Yet none of those tools told you to look beyond one suspect with no motive, no connection, no history of violence, and no forensic presence at the crime of the scene, aside from a degraded DNA scrap on an object that anyone could have touched. We believe the totality of the evidence supports our conclusion. Of course you do. You built the totality. Reasonableness. As the dagger. Detective, let's define reasonable investigation. Would a reasonable investigation consider multiple potential suspects early on? Yes. Would a reasonable investigation vet their alibis and compare forensic findings objectively? Yes. Would a reasonable investigation test multiple white Elantras in the area before zeroing in on one 12 days later? Detective would say, we used the data available. The defense would then say, but not all the data, just the data that fit the story you were writing, which we do know. Obviously, that was a working PCA. Multiple people had claimed that they worked on it. Detective Payne said it clear as day. All right, the closing blast. You had tunnel vision, you had pressure, you had headlines to feed. So you built a case around Brian Koberger, not because the evidence demanded it, but because you needed it to. That's not justice, that's theater. And now we're here trying to convict a man because you were afraid to ask harder questions. Oh, this actually says, Sammy, if you're still in here, did you say it was the Daubert? What was the I thought you just said a different name of the defense. They will attack their investigation and attack their experts on Bowden and defense and Daubert defense. Hell yeah. Thank you. So the Bowden or Bowden defense argues law enforcement conducted an incomplete, biased, or negligent investigation. The Daubert standard challenges scientific validity and admissibility of the state's forensic evidence, especially the DNA used to implicate Koberger. If you guys want to go back and watch Sammy T and I dive into it, that was on Thursday, so that would have been the 26th. I have a quick cut recap of it, and I also have the full live reposted. Sammy does a great job diving into it. The Bowden defense would be for the police, Sammy says. So together, these become a tactical wrecking ball that destroys investigative credibility, demolishes the DNA narrative, and creates bulletproof reasonable doubt. This says the investigation was irreversibly tainted. Detective, are you familiar with the term confirmation bias? Yes. It's when investigators, consciously or not, shape their decisions to fit the conclusion they've already formed, correct? That is correct. Would you agree that to avoid confirmation bias, investigators must test all reasonable alternative hypotheses? Yes. And in this case, you did not do that. We investigated all credible leads. Well, you ruled out other individuals based on incomplete, non-forensic, or self-reported information, didn't you? We evaluated all evidence. Did you test every possible suspect? So it's kind of actually what it just did. I'm not going to reread the whole thing. In the most important murder case in Idaho history, the state's star evidence is a half-baked match from a private lab using unverified methods connecting someone else's DNA taken from a trash can to a partial, unviable fragment on an object anyone could have touched. Ladies and gentlemen, if that's science, I'm the tooth fairy. Oh, see, I could see Alan Jackson saying that. I don't know if I could see Ann Taylor saying that. The Idaho standard is called, it says traditional Daubert or Fry standards. Officially, Idaho doesn't follow either test. Instead, Idaho relies on Idaho Rule of Evidence 702 combined with factors derived from Daubert-style reasoning. So the 702 is an expert must be qualified by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education. No formal Daubert or Fry mandate. The key case law is Weeks versus Idaho Health Services. The older precedent was Merwin of 98. So, the IRE 702 grounds is insufficient facts, data, unreliable methods, weak application to the case. So now let's go watch the Karen Reed opening statements. Oh, geez. It's an hour and a half. Let's see if there's one that's... Well, let's just watch this one. Let's watch the defense one.
The evidence in this case will establish above everything else 3 points. There was no collision with John O'Keefe. There was no collision. There was no collision. John O'Keefe did not die from being hit by a vehicle, period. The facts will show that. The evidence will show that. The data will show that. The science will show that. And the experts will tell you that. You'll learn that the Commonwealth has pinned its entire case on a brazen and a flawed assertion that is untethered, unconnected to the facts and to the evidence. And their assertion is contrary to science. Because at the end of the day, folks, there was no collision with John O'Keefe.
That's funny. It's on 1.75 speed.
So
By
how
the
did we
way.
end up here? How does Karen Reed end up sitting in that chair on trial for something for an event that literally never happened? Well, the evidence is going to explain it. And it can be summed up in the following text message at the very beginning of this investigation. A text message of a now fired Massachusetts state police officer named Michael Proctor. He was the lead investigator on this case.
I know.
And he was talking about a fellow officer, a fellow cop who owned the property where John O'Keefe's body was found.
I just keep forgetting.
Text message with a buddy. Question, is the homeowner going to catch any shit? Answer, nope. He's a Boston cop too. That quote defines the lack of integrity of the Commonwealth's entire case, its entire investigation, and this prosecution. During the course of this trial, you'll learn much more about Mr. Proctor, why he said that, and what it really means. What you'll see and hear in this courtroom in the coming weeks is not just a story of a tragic loss. And make no mistake, John O'Keefe's death is and was a tragic and tragic loss. But the story you'll hear is about an investigation that was riddled with errors from the beginning, a rushed judgment, conflicted and corrupted from the start, corrupted by bias, corrupted by incompetence, and corrupted by deceit. Finally, it was corrupted by a deliberate effort to avoid and to cover up the very truth that you are seeking. You'll find when you hear the evidence that the Commonwealth's case is the literal definition of reasonable doubt. They won't be able to talk their way out of it. They won't be able to explain their way out of it. They won't be able to excuse their way out of it. And they can't meet their extreme burden of proof, which the court will tell you is beyond any and all reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. Members of the jury, Karen Reed found John O'Keefe dead on the front lawn of Boston police officer Brian Albert at 6 a.m. on January 29th, 2022. Picture the scene. Blood-curdling screams, ambulances, emergency lights on, fire engines, ladder trucks, paramedics, patrol vehicles, patrol cruisers, police officers, first responders, firefighters, all swarming all over Brian Albert's lawn, literally feet under his bedroom window. Yet Brian Albert, a sworn peace officer, a first responder himself, never came outside.
That is crazy,
Never went
dude.
outside
Never went
to see what chaos was about,
outside.
never went outside to see if he could assist a man in need, never walked outside his house to see if he could help a fallen fellow officer on his own front lawn. More shockingly, you'll learn that lead investigator for the Massachusetts police, Michael Proctor, never set foot inside Brian Albert's house that day. Never engaged in any investigation inside that house that day, even though a party with much alcohol had just occurred in that house, and even though a Boston police officer was found dead or dying just mere feet from the front door on that lawn. He never secured the crime scene, never separated and secured witnesses. He never properly collected evidence. He never secured the evidence. He never searched for signs of a struggle inside or outside the home. He never properly canvassed the neighborhood. Michael Proctor never did any of these things, even though fellow officers of Michael Proctor's actually mentioned, in their words, not mine, that it looked like John O'Keefe may have been, quote, in a fight. You'll have questions about that conduct. During the course of this trial, you'll find that the Commonwealth will not have answers. You'll see from the evidence in this case that this case carries a malignancy, one that is spread through the investigation, it's spread through the prosecution from the very start, from the jump. A cancer that cannot be cut out, a cancer that cannot be cured. And that cancer has a name. His name is Michael Proctor.
Ooh.
Now, you didn't hear his name in the prosecution's opening statement. Not once. I suspect that was probably by design. But make no mistake about it. The evidence will show in this case that Michael Proctor is the very definition of the Commonwealth's case.
Hold on. Is that true, Amy? You're not trolling? Amy said, I represented myself in Supreme Matrimonial Court and used ChatGPT, and I won my case, which was complicated. It really helped me. Holy hell. That's crazy, Amy. Are you like a ChatGPT guru with prompts? I mean, it's pretty impressive.
And he's also their Achilles heel. He was the lead investigator on the case officer, the architect of the entire prosecution. You'll learn there's not a single part of this case, folks, not a single part that he didn't touch, that he didn't direct, that he didn't orchestrate personally. Every single bit of it has his fingerprints on it. You'll learn that Michael Proctor was a longtime family friend of the Alberts. And he's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us, by the Massachusetts State Police. Investigated, suspended, and fired. The evidence will show that Massachusetts State Police found him guilty, found Michael Proctor guilty of bringing dishonor to the department for his conduct, not in some other case, not in some tangential case. In this case, the investigation of Karen Reed, conduct that included bias in favor of his friends, the all-powerful Albert family, and bias against my client, Miss Reed, the outsider. Do you have any idea how hard it is for a state trooper to get fired? Well, the evidence is going to show that Michael Proctor earned it, every bit of it. You'll hear that within hours of a Boston police officer being found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, who had investigated exactly nothing up to this point, right at the beginning, made an early pronouncement that Brian Albert himself was not going to, quote, catch any shit, end quote. And that was for one reason, and one reason only. He's a Boston cop. The evidence will show that Michael Proctor made this statement in a text conversation with his high school buddies, a text he never thought would see the light of day, certainly never thought we would get a hold of. And when he thought no one was looking, he actually said the quiet part out loud. He's a cop too. We'll give him a pass. You'll learn that in Michael Proctor's world,
I feel like Karen Reed's just sitting there like he's killing it. He's crushing it right now.
rank has its privileges. The evidence will show that's privileges that you don't get and I don't get. But apparently a Boston police officer, Brian Albert, and his friends.
Alan Jackson, I know they crowdfunded. Did he offer to do it pro bono? I don't remember. And obviously I didn't follow the Karen Reed case as closely as some people in here did. Did he do pro bono or was he completely paid?
They do get. You'll learn that in Michael Proctor's world,
oh, they were
he didn't care about finding the truth. In his world, his priority was to protect the brotherhood, to protect that blue wall, to protect his friends who were at the Albert's house that night. I want to take a step back, if I could, and spend the next few minutes talking a little bit more detail about what the actual facts in this case will show, not based on speculation, not based on surmise, not based on guesswork or conjecture, but the actual true facts that you'll learn through the course of this trial. On January 28, 2022, it was a Friday night. John and Karen had made plans to meet up with friends for drinks. It was a happy and normal night for them. They were affectionate. They were loving. They were in good spirits. Nothing out of the ordinary. They started at a local watering hole called C.F. McCarthy's. You've heard that name before, and you'll hear it again. And eventually, they made their way over to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, another bar where they ended up. When they got to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, the Albert family was already there, already heavily drinking. You'll learn that this was no ordinary family, the Alberts. The Albert family was a well-known Canton family. Some might even describe them as a very powerful Canton family. Brian Albert was there at the Waterfall. You'll hear that he's a longtime Boston police officer. His wife, Nicole Albert, was there with him. His brother, Chris Albert, a powerful Canton politician. He sits on the select board. The select board actually governs the police department, Canton PD. He was there. His wife, Julie Albert, was there. Their daughter, Caitlin Albert, was there. His sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, was there. Her husband, Matt McCabe, was also there. They were all there drinking before John and before Karen ever arrived. You'll learn that a man by the name of Brian Higgins, also a law enforcement officer and longtime friend, longtime pal of Brian Albert, he was also there. And the two of them, the two Brians, had been drinking most of the night together. You'll see video footage from the waterfall, which will show you that Karen and John were happy. They were affectionate. They were caring. They were loving. Just business as usual, out on a date on a Friday night. But that exact same video footage which lead investigator Michael Proctor plainly chose to ignore that video footage. It paints a very different picture of Brian Higgins. You'll learn that Higgins had romantic designs for Karen. That becomes important. Brian Higgins had engaged Karen in flirtatious texts, but days earlier she'd put a stop to it. She'd ghosted him, in common parlance. In other words, just ignored him. The evidence will show that the first time he saw her and was in her presence after being rejected by her was when she walked into the Waterfall Bar and Grill along with her boyfriend, John O'Keefe. At 11:58 p.m.
Now, again, I don't know. I'm just going off of what I'm remembering, which again, this could be wrong. Did Karen engage with dude long enough in those texts where like she flirted back, or was it always like, I know they were texting, but like whenever he started like really flirting, did he stop then right away? I guess I'm not claiming to be an expert on the Karen Reed one. I'm just curious. It's just following it like generally.
Yeah, just minutes before John ultimately arrived at the Albert residence, you'll see a video at the waterfall of an unsettling interaction, troubling interaction between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. And unlike the lead investigator Michael Proctor in this case, you won't ignore that evidence. As the bar was closing around 12 midnight, the Alberts invited everybody back to their house for a get-together, just keep the night going. And you'll learn that Karen and John ultimately pulled up to the house. They got out of the SUV to make sure they had the right address. You see, neither John nor Karen had ever been to 34 Fairview. They weren't even sure they were the right address. And the evidence will establish that John got out of the SUV and went into the house. Let me say that again. The facts unequivocally, the data, the science, the witnesses will all unequivocally establish that John O'Keefe went into the Albert home that night.
So while that's going, you guys might laugh at this, but one of the things that I originally had thought when you could hear Karen Reed yelling at John, calling him a pervert, I know everyone's kind of got different opinions on this. I thought it had to do with the fact that John had used to date somebody who lived on that street, and she was maybe pissed about it because didn't John call somebody for the address, and if like his phone was connected to the Bluetooth over the speakers, and she's like, oh yeah, it's right by like your ex's house or whatever, I could see that causing some sort of a stir. But I know that there's a lot of people who are talking about like how people in that house are like swinging and shit like that too. So I am curious, like, did Karen ever come out and say why she was calling John a pervert other than just being, I know she kind of briefly touched on it, but did the full reason come out? It was because of Bella's mom?
Eyewitnesses and forensic data will establish that fact. When he didn't come back out, you'll learn that Karen grew increasingly frustrated. She got upset. She was left alone in a car, in the cold, in the middle of the night, with the car idling. John had gone into the house. She expected him to come right back out. And when he didn't, seconds turned into minutes, and minutes started to clock away. She left John a voicemail, then another voicemail, voicemail after voicemail after voicemail, text messages. But he was unresponsive. He didn't pick up a single call. He didn't respond to a single text. The longer he didn't respond, the more upset she got. The Commonwealth will intimate, as they already have in their opening statement, that these voicemails are evidence that the two were fighting. The actual evidence in this case, however, will show the exact opposite. You'll hear that Karen was very agitated. You'll hear some voicemails where she's swearing. You'll hear voicemails where she calls them names. There's name calling. But you'll also hear the context of those voicemails. And every single one of those voicemails was left for John after he failed to come back out of the house, after he failed to respond to her voicemails and to her texts. Karen believed John had just left her sitting there, grabbed a beer, was partying with his friends. The evidence will actually show that John and Karen never had a crossword, not a single crossword that entire evening before he left that SUV and went inside the house. And you will learn what Karen had absolutely no way of knowing at the time. It wasn't that he wouldn't respond to her. It's that he couldn't respond to her. And the evidence will show you why. Let's talk about that. We'll introduce you to a doctor named Elizabeth Lopesada, a renowned forensic pathologist, a medical examiner, and a professor at Brown University. She will tell you that the injury to the back of John's head, first of all, was immediately incapacitating. And that has meaning. At the moment he suffered that fatal head injury, he couldn't walk, talk, grab his phone, cry for help, nothing. He was completely incapacitated, completely unconscious from the moment he suffered that injury. He was completely still and incapable of interacting with anyone or anything. But the doctor will tell you something more, and just as important. She'll tell you that John O'Keefe did not suffer from hypothermia, as the Commonwealth will undoubtedly allege. His body showed no signs of it. No frostbite, no cold-induced injuries to his organs, no damage based on cold or frost. Ladies and gentlemen, the scientific evidence and the medical evidence will establish that John O'Keefe had to be injured somewhere else, somewhere warmer, and his body had to have been moved out into the cold. And that's where, ultimately at 6 a.m., Karen found him the next morning. You will learn that John did not have a single injury consistent with being hit by a car. Let me say that again. The evidence will establish that John did not suffer a single injury on his body consistent with having been hit by a car, not one. You'll learn that John's torso, his ribs, his chest, his arms, his hips, his legs, his knees, his ankles, his feet, all of it, no broken bones, no fractures, no contusions, no torn ligaments, no internal injuries, not even a bruise. Nothing consistent with a car accident, despite the Commonwealth's contention that he was slammed into by a 6,000-pound SUV. Not a bruise. Dr. Lopesada will tell you with medical certainty that John was not. He could not have been struck by a vehicle. Therefore, as I said, there was no collision. She will tell you that the patterned abrasions on John's right arm, the patterned abrasions you see over my left shoulder, they're not the result of being struck by a car or a taillight. You'll take one look at these injuries and you'll agree with Dr. Lopesada. The evidence will show that these injuries are from an animal, like a large dog, like the large dog that was inside the Albert house that night. You'll learn that Brian Albert has actually admitted that his large dog, the family dog, is, quote, not good with strangers. And of course, John, never having been to the house before, was a stranger that night. You'll also learn that oddly, very oddly, after having their family pet for 7 years, a short time after this incident, the Alberts got rid of that dog. They called it rehoming her, but she was gone. Dr. Lopesada will also tell you that the injury to John's head was not the result of falling backward onto a flat lawn, cold or otherwise. Rather, Dr. Lopesada will tell you with medical certainty that the injury pattern to his scalp was produced by an impact from a raised or ledged surface, a surface that does not exist on Brian Albert's front lawn where John was found. The medical evidence will establish no hypothermia, no injuries from a car strike, no collision with a motor vehicle. And forensic analysis of John's cell phone, Mr. Brennan mentioned that in his opening statement, the Commonwealth's own expert will ultimately support the exact facts that I just told you, including the temperature data. John O'Keefe was injured someplace warmer, and he was moved. That alone is reasonable doubt, but there's much more. You'll also learn that there were many people at that after-hours gathering at Brian Albert's house who would have left by the front door just feet from where John O'Keefe's body would have ultimately been, had he actually been there, right after 12:30 a.m., which is what the Commonwealth's claim is. There were nearly a dozen people who walked out that front door directly adjacent to the precise spot where John O'Keefe would have been lying. Not a single person, not one, not a single person, saw a 6'2", 216-pound man laying sprawled in the front lawn in dark clothing on a light white dusting of snow. Not one. Then the evidence will also show that every one of those same people drove by that same spot, not walked by it, drove by it to leave the house, and still not one of them saw John laying in the yard when they left between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. But you know who else you'll find never saw a body on that lawn? The snowplow driver, a completely independent witness charged with plowing the streets in Canton that night. You'll hear that Michael Proctor, oh, he's not done yet, Mr. Proctor. You'll hear that Michael Proctor wrote a report where he claimed that Fairview had not been plowed that night. You'll learn that that was completely false. That was a lie. Michael Proctor did not want any more witnesses. He didn't want the truth, and he falsely claimed that the road was never plowed. You'll learn that he wouldn't look for the plow driver, but we did, and we found, and we'll introduce you to, Brian Loughran. He plowed Fairview that night, and what he's going to tell you is that there was no body on that lawn at 2:30 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Loughran passed by 34 Fairview, traveling right next to Brian Albert's front yard, and at 2:30 a.m., John O'Keefe was not there. But you'll see that the plow driver also provides some other troubling information, troubling testimony for the Commonwealth. You'll learn that after making that pass at 2:30 a.m., he showed up with his plow an hour later. He stopped at the entrance of Fairview. He was looking up Fairview to decide whether or not to plow it, but he saw an obstruction. At 3:30 a.m., he looked down the street, and in the very spot precisely where Karen would later find John's body laying at 6 a.m., there was a car parked in front of it. a Ford Edge. You're going to ask yourself, who's moving the car at 3:30 in the morning?
You know what? I want to go back and see Ann Taylor opening statement prior cases. Well, I guess let's just go. Let's watch this.
Tonight, Ann Taylor, lead attorney for accused quadruple murderer Brian, expected 11th. It is now she has been fighting to get the trial delayed.
You know, if Ann Taylor
This isn't anything. What the heck? Does anybody know of a video that you can see Ann's opening statement from a prior case? Yeah, that would be an epic t-shirt. Well, I will move on to wrapping the stream up with a tinfoil hat conspiracy of the day that the moon is a hologram and a map of the earth, but it sounds completely crazy. Just stick with me here. There are some people who believe the moon is not a natural celestial body, but rather a massive holographic projection that's operated jointly by NASA, the Vatican, and possibly Freemason lunar cults. In 1969, when Apollo 12 landed on the moon, they set off a seismic charge, and the moon rang like a bell for nearly an hour. Several ancient cultures make no mention of the moon in their earliest astronomical records. Some even claim it suddenly appeared in the sky around 5,000 years ago. NASA has a department literally called Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Camera. Sounds normal until you realize they've released shockingly few high-res images of the actual landing sites and 0 full 360-degree panoramic shots. The Vatican has the Lucifer telescope in Arizona aimed at space. Why is the church tracking celestial anomalies with an observatory named after the Prince of Darkness? The theory is that the moon is a holographic control center or even a camouflaged orbital base used to monitor or influence the human mind via electromagnetic resonance. Every full moon, not just tides and werewolves, we're talking mass psychological calibration. I don't know if that's funny or if that's creepy more so, because if that's true, that would be insane. But I do believe that there may be truth to that because of the whole ancient cultures talking about how the moon was never there or that the moon showed up about 5,000 years ago. That is interesting. A lot of old records do not ever talk about a moon. The flat earth thing is a little bit, it's so controversial, but I will say, like, have you ever seen this flat earth in other in ancient times versus NASA? There's like this or like, hang on, we are the only civilization. I'm trying to find this picture because this is super interesting. Wow. Ancient civilization. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this. Because there's like a side by side that is this it? Oh, here it is. And it says that all ancient civilizations depicted the earth as flat, and then NASA. So again, it's not that maybe there's not it's not like a round sphere. It's that the living plane where we live is a flat plane with a firmament or a dome above. It is interesting. It is also wild that every globe, there are people, everyone, that believe, like I asked, like if you do this on your phone, right? If you do this on your phone and you zoom all the way out, there are people that don't understand this is an animation. I asked a lot, like we were up north and I asked people, I'm like, you guys know, like that's an animation. They're like, people were like, is it? I'm like, wait, you're telling me you think this is the earth? We can just see that? I don't know. Do I believe the earth is flat? Chat, what do you guys think? Do you think I think the earth is flat? Type of 1 if you think I do. Type of 2 if you think I don't. Because maybe the answer will surprise you. Or not. I'm just curious. What's your guys' read on me? Apparently a lot of 1s and 2s. Well, you'll never know. You'll never know what I think. Yeah, please send me all that stuff. I mean, I have my opinions on it. I definitely, like, a giant part of me thinks that it could be flat. The whole pilots and the emergency landings is crazy. What's that long canal too that they use for shipping? There's like a couple things where people like break it down and it's like, but okay. Also, I just want to go back again to how I started this stream, where real quick, guys, everybody knows the biggest fan troll that Viviana Marie or FFS Viviana, whatever it is. She does like the cartoon bird for Birdie Bombshells and just roasts the streams. If you guys find clips of her mentioning my name or showing the channel, please help me clip them. Like I said, she made there's something going around where, and it's being looked into as far as like saying Birdie made the snuff film or whatever it is, which is just effed up. So unfortunately, I don't care if people troll, but it's like, I also feel like that's like too far. And I'm not trying to be even weird about it because this is the first time that I've even had to get, because there's also a business attached to this name and me. So that's where our attorneys were like, that might be one. So just to let you guys know. But anyways, with that being said, Hive, that was interesting to go down the rabbit holes of potential defense, potential prosecution, and thank you all for tuning in on Saturday. I guess I got on here kind of mid-morning, but for anybody that started their day with me and the Hive, thank you. Tomorrow evening, I will be on at 7 p.m. Central. Although Mrs. Birdie and I are going to a wedding, assuming all things go according to plan, we should be home in plenty of time. But regardless, Monday I have Devil's Advocates on, and I will also get an updated streaming schedule with the 4th of July coming up. I've got some content that I'm going to pre-record too, so there'll be videos hopefully coming out the majority of those days over the long weekend. But anyways, with that being said, go enjoy your weekend, get outside, touch some grass, tell people the earth is flat, maybe. Anyways, have a great day, everybody. Cheers.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.